Hey everybody, this week we're going to talk about the Industrial Revolution. There'll be two videos. This is the first of the two videos. If we break down the whole idea of Industrial Revolution, what that word might mean, if we were in class today, I might ask someone what revolution meant. You would all raise your hands. I would call on somebody. The first person would ask to go to the bathroom. And then the second person might say a revolution. That's Mr. Keck. Isn't that like a big change? And I'd say, yeah, probably. And then the whole idea of industrial is what comes to my mind, at least, is the production of goods. So if you had me last year, we talked about the Industrial Revolution a little bit, and perhaps you recall that the Industrial Revolution started in England and spread to Europe, and it really changed the way people did things and the way people lived. Uh, Before the Industrial Revolution, all products, all goods were produced in the home. So if you wanted a shirt, you'd go out back and you'd make yourself a shirt. You didn't mass produce anything, any equipment, any machines. You actually probably didn't even use machines. There wasn't a tractor. There wasn't any automation. So, for example, food. Uh, you would grow what it is you ate at where you lived. There were no factories canning things for mass production of goods. So life really changed after the Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution starts in England, goes to Europe, and it eventually makes its way to the United States or to the Americas. There are several people that are very important as far as the Industrial Revolution. The first guy is Samuel Slater, which that's him over there on the right. Samuel Slater, he's an interesting story because, like I just told you, the Industrial Revolution starts in England. Well, Samuel Slater is born in England. He is an apprentice, which means he works somewhere and he gets training on a skill, and he worked in a cotton mill in England. And he learned how to take cotton and turn it into thread. So a cotton mill uses water to power the machinery uh, in the cotton mill to make the thread. So at this time, it was guarded technology in England. In fact, it was against the law to take that knowledge and take it somewhere else to another country. Well, Slater decides that he can go to America and he can take this knowledge that he has, he can set up a mill and make a lot of money. And he's right. The trouble again, though, is that it's illegal. So when he sails to the United States, he kind of sneaks off. He sails under an assumed name, doesn't tell the authorities who he is, and he tells people that he's a farmer. Well, his plan to come to America and make it big actually works out quite well for him. This is the first mill that he builds over here on the left. It's a mill that he built in Rhode Island, a cotton mill. Now, I say it's his first mill. He ends up building about 60, at least 60 mills. I've read he had 60 mills that were built and had 20 mills ready to come online. So he profits from all these mills. He sets up mill towns, which were kind of controversial in that he employs women and children. He sets up the entire town around the milling operation. He schools the children, but he makes them work too. Women are working, which was odd in those days. So he sets up the whole idea of a mill town, which is going to be used later in the mining industry. And while he was considered the father of the American Industrial Revolution, he wasn't looked on so favorably in England because they called him Slater the Traitor. Again, because he took that technology from England that he was supposed to be guarded and took it over to the United States, and it made him boatloads of money. The next guy, Robert Fulton, he established steamboat service in the New York area, actually on the Hudson River. This is a picture of his first steamboat. It was called the Celebration. So, what a steamboat would do is that it could, unlike any other boat that would have a mast and a sail, it could go upriver. And people, when they tried to demonstrate it the first time, people were shocked. They didn't think it was going to work. It was the silliest thing that they'd ever seen. It started out, I guess, it stalled at first. People started laughing. Then the machine started to work, and it started to go upriver. And they were just amazed at it. But he didn't invent the steamboat. He just came up with the idea of steamboat service. He and Slater both. And Slater's, all of his mills were concentrated in the northeast part of the United States. There was another guy who was important, one of the important guys in the Industrial Revolution in the Americas, and this guy was Samuel F.B. Morse. He invented the telegraph. So the telegraph uses electronic pulses to communicate. I say he invented it. Some people contest whether he's the true inventor of it. His life is kind of interesting. He actually spent most of his life as a portrait painter. His parents weren't too happy about it, so he gets his formal education and he goes over to Europe and learns how to become a painter, and he becomes a painter of portraits. And these are some of the portraits that he painted. I don't know any of these people other than the fact that this is him here. It's a self-portrait. But the telegraph is what makes him very famous. And if you've ever heard of Morse code, well, this is it over here, and he's responsible for that as well. So he had to file a patent for the telegraph, and his patent was accepted, which gave him credit for the invention and allowed him to make a lot of money on that invention. It was a very important invention. It allowed people to communicate all over the Americas, and it was instantaneous communication. Previous to this, if you had a message to send, maybe you'd send it by courier, but there was no way to effectively communicate almost instantaneously, right away, until the telegraph was invented. So, to move supplies, to set up train schedules. There was a military aspect to it in the Civil War to get information about troop movements. I know Lincoln came to rely on it. So it became very important. There were a lot of people who came along later and said that they had a hand in inventing the telegraph. And it was contested all the way up to the Supreme Court, but Morse was able to hold off all the other parties who claimed that they invented it. But it's pretty clear if you go back and read through his biography that he had a lot of help from people to make this work, to be successful. This guy, I've got to include him for no other reason than look at the dude's hair. I mean, that's awesome. There are other pictures out there where he's got this hair down to his shoulders, and he's also got a full beard. He kind of looks like an 80s rocker, not that anybody would know what that is. But his name's Elias Howe, and he invented the sewing machine. Of course, that's the sewing machine over there. Now, if we talk about the Industrial Revolution again, if you needed a shirt, you didn't go up to Walmart to get your shirt. You had to make it in the home. So when he invented the sewing machine, it allowed things like clothing to be mass produced. So, I mean, this was very important. So the whole textile industry they were producing the textiles, the threads, the cloth. They could mass produce clothes now. He actually wasn't very successful selling his sewing machine. There was another company that came along. His patent also was contested. So his patent was contested to the point that people didn't want to invest in him to build his company. But one company did get a lot of people to invest in it. And they were actually very innovative. It was called the Singer Company. And I've heard of Singer sewing machines. But what he ended up doing, excuse me, was taking the Singer Company to court, and he won against them. He said essentially that they were using his patent, and they had to pay him $5 for every sewing machine that they sold, which ended up making him very wealthy, although it was very late in his life that he ended up coming into the money. It was just for defending his patent, his invention. Now, all these people were concentrated in the northern part of the United States, and that's going to be important for a reason here. If you take a look at this is transportation networks prior to 1860. 1860 is important because it's just prior to the Civil War. So if you take a look, you see there are a lot of canals located in the northern part of the United States. The red lines are roads. Most of them are located in the United States. And navigable rivers, which means they're rivers that you can sail on, they're a little more spread out. But there are a lot of those in the northern part of the United States as well. So all these transportation networks, they carry people, but more importantly, they carry goods. And it becomes pretty evident too on this railway map. You can see the red line is the railways, and if you look at the northern states, there's a whole lot more rail development in the north. And this was because industrialization. They're producing goods, they have factories, they're making things, and they need the rail support to move things from place to place. There is some rail lines in the south, but not nearly as many. Again, I'm sticking to this date, 1860, because if you take the Industrial Revolution, you can really, in the United States at least, you can really break it into two parts. There's pre-Civil War and post-Civil War. This video is really talking about pre-Civil War. So if you take a look here at this map, it's showing you the textile industry again, and they're taking raw materials and turning those materials into cloth or to thread or into thread. And you can see that they're really located up here in the Northeast. All right. If you think of Slater the Trader, this is where he ended up here in the Northeast. All right. You look at these other manufacturing, here are these places. You can see them again in the Northeast. You see some in the South, but not much. All right. So, I mean, this is kind of important just to show again that this Industrial Revolution, it's really taking place primarily in the northern states. And the reason that is important, because if you remember the Civil War, it was between the North and the South. The fact that all the industrialization was to the North gave them a tremendous advantage. It gave them the transportation networks were there, so they could move people, they could move supplies, but they could produce the supplies. You know, in a war, you need a lot of supplies. You need tents, you need guns, you need uniforms. You need to be able to move food. You need to be able to move people. Well, the North has a tremendous built-in advantage in that they have all these things in the North in abundance as opposed to in the South. A lot of people think the South had better soldiers, better generals, but the North has more resources. And ultimately, it's going to help them win the war. So, like I said, in the United States, we can talk about the Industrial Revolution. It's really in two parts. There's the part that's before the Civil War, and there's the part that's after the Civil War. After the Civil War, it's kind of a teaser. We're going to talk about trains, and we're going to talk about immigrants. All right, and this is probably the second part is probably the most important part of our Industrial Revolution in the United States, but that's for another video. I'll talk to you soon. See you later.